Thanks for listening to the ArtTactic Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Green. In this week's episode, we're joined by Alex Gartenfeld, Artistic Director at ICA Miami. Over the past few years, the museum has become one of the most talked about institutions in the U.S., thanks in large part to Alex's leadership. ICA Miami has built a reputation for its ambitious acquisitions, particularly of rising artists, and it plays a central role during Art Basel Miami, hosting one of the most well-attended events of the Fair Week. Beyond its curatorial vision, Alex has cultivated a strong support network of collectors, both in Miami and beyond, helping fuel the museum's growth. In this episode, we discuss all of this with Alex, just ahead of ICA Miami's annual Evening in the Garden Gala on Saturday, March 8th. This year's event features a benefit auction with works by Claire Tabouret, Robin F. Williams, Hugh Hayden, Lauren Quin, Ken Gunmin, and others. To explore the auction and place bids, you can visit gala.icamiami.org or feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm serving on the auction committee this year. And if you'll be in Miami for the gala, please let me know. I'd love to say hi. We hope you enjoy our conversation with Alex. Thanks so much for listening. Alex, thanks so much for joining us.
Adam, thank you for having me, and thank you for being an Evening in the Garden auction co-chair.
Absolutely. It's been really exciting to be involved with the event and support the institution. So I'm excited to chat about the gala, but I first wanted to ask if you can share a little bit more about the museum's history. I feel like at this point, most people in the art world are familiar with ICA Miami, and I imagine many have visited, perhaps during Basel Miami Week. But I do think it's quite rare for a museum so young to have such a strong presence in the art world already. And while it's a brief history, I think the origin story is really interesting and surprisingly not as well known. So for those who aren't too familiar with the museum's history, can you share its origin and really its evolution into what it is today?
Sure, I appreciate that, Adam. So I moved to Miami in 2013 to be the curator at the Museum of Contemporary Art in North Miami, which is a fantastic museum that has a stellar reputation for breaking emerging talent and spotlighting artists from Miami. So I was drawn to Miami from New York by that curatorial reputation and the opportunity to work here. When I arrived, and shortly thereafter, I became the director of the organization. We discovered that the board, and it was a community of people who really just were incredible collectors and philanthropists, had been trying to grow this museum for about a decade, and had been looking at every single option as to how to expand their impact. Because even then, in 2013, or 2013 or 10 years earlier, there was a lot of momentum for the arts in Miami. And over the course of about a year, we resolved upon what became the perfect solution. And that entailed two really important catalytic philanthropic gifts, one from Craig Robbins and the other from Norman Brayman. Irma is to this day our board co-chair, who made possible the purchase, design, and construction of our permanent facility. So that all happened in around 2014. Now, at that time, we launched a temporary space in the Moore Building, which is a really beautiful and important historical arts building in Miami, about 2 blocks from our permanent space that you know today. You may have been there. It had a great reputation for arts programming itself. Actually, Rosa and Carlos de la Cruz had programmed there about 5 to 8 years earlier before they opened their space. We programmed for about 3 years, started building our collection, started showcasing the types of exhibitions we were going to make while we were planning and ultimately building the facility that we're in today. Our programs there concluded at the end of 2016, and we opened the building that we're in 2017. And then just to fast forward a little bit, over a program that includes some artists who I really love, Judy Chicago, Sterling Ruby, Terry Atkins, Alan McCullum, many others. We have been really privileged to build an amazing community around this institution. And over the last 2 years, we've been working behind the scenes on an expansion, which involves the purchase of the building that used to belong to Rosa and Carlos de la Cruz. And we announced the closing on that facility in October. And so within the next 2 years, we will be doubling in programmatic size and scope.
That's really exciting news about the expansion. Congrats. I can't wait to see it come to life and visit the new space when it's ready. I also wanted to ask about ICA Miami's really deep engagement with the growing art community in Miami, as well as even collectors outside of the city who seem to have developed really good relationships with the museum. You've successfully built a dedicated and active support network, and I think in many ways, these collectors have sort of become ambassadors for IC Miami, helping to promote it, whether it's through donations or acquisitions or even just sharing it with the art world on social media. How have you cultivated this kind of enthusiastic and engaged community around the museum?
Well, I appreciate that. And I think this opportunity is a good time to spotlight a few key constituencies. And the first, I think, is artists. And because we work with artists primarily at really crucial times in their career when there is transformation or growth or a rewriting of the history and context of an artist's work, that forges really deep relationships with artists. And so we've been really fortunate to have that experience with a number of our exhibiting artists. I think also, I hope and I think that we've been successful in focusing on and nurturing leading artists living and working in Miami. And so that also kind of builds the ecosystem of support, and it's made, in part, Miami an exciting place for artists to live and to work and to build their practices. So that's one key constituency. And then the second that you mentioned, closely related, is a community of great collectors. Now, Miami was always a great community of collectors. They just happen to live behind closed doors, so you don't necessarily know that everybody's here, but it's an amazing community. You certainly wouldn't know it if you're coming in for a week at a time. I've obviously been fortunate over the last 10, almost 12 years to build those kinds of relationships. Now, the community here is super diverse and nuanced and obviously growing. There's an incredible collector base from Latin America, which has been inspiring and educational for me. Another point of focus for us has been legacy philanthropists in this community. So over the past 12 years that I've been working on this museum, we've seen a total cultural shift and perceptual shift of the city, so that legacy philanthropists feel comfortable that this city and the institutions that reside here are the place where they should do their giving and ultimately kind of make a mark. Another really kind of key point of focus for me has been that next generation. So those legacy philanthropists have kids and grandkids, and historically they moved away and didn't come back. And the last decade has seen a total shift in perception on this. And so we see a lot of great next generation people coming or staying, or entrepreneurs trying to build their business. Now, with that, because Miami's a pretty new city, particularly when you relate it to places like New York and Chicago, where a lot of people end up moving from if they're moving here, the institutions are in a different growth stage. So we started, this museum is only 12 years old. So inevitably, we're at a different growth stage based upon other institutions in similar markets. Now, I think that's a really exciting opportunity for a lot of the people who are here or are coming here, because you have the opportunity to grow and change with an organization. Now, the strategy piece to that is just to build alongside other really qualified individuals, take feedback, keep people busy, and just share as much as you can all the exciting things that are happening here with as many people as possible.
And you mentioned that ICA Miami is just over a decade old, which is remarkably young by museum terms. And during that short time, it's built a really impressive collection, I think, particularly through acquisitions of younger artists. Now, many museums actually kind of shy away from this, I think. I've heard a variety of reasons why. Sometimes I've heard storage limitations, or perhaps less focused approach on artists at that stage of their career, or other types of constraints. Can you tell us about the vision behind your strategy at IC Miami? And do you see this approach as a way to ensure that the museum's collection will hold historical significance in the future as the museum continues to grow and get older? Because for some of the really successful artists, as they advance in their career, their prices go up, and they reach a point where they're really not affordable for museums to be able to acquire on their own for their collections.
There's a lot to say about that. But I'll begin by saying I think that the last 10 years, and I can say this with a little bit of like self-reflexivity or just sort of performative naivete, but has seen what I would call, the most robust debut of new artists and new talent and new ideas to the art world and art ecology that have ever been seen. I would venture that there are more artists working today than at any point previously. I think there are a number of reasons for this. Some of them, I think they're closely related and have to do with the education system and the rise of MFAs, the rise of creative economies, and a perceptual shift about what it means to be an artist and whether or not you can, sustainably live, in a community while being an artist or a creative. I think that's obviously another adjacent rich topic. But what it comes down to is over the last decade, I've been, so fortunate, and so many of my colleagues have been, to meet with and to connect with and to ultimately steward so many incredible works of art. And, that is the key kind of motivation for the museum and its collection. So that's kind of enough right there. Now, that said, institutionally, and I do think there are a lot of, actually, I think that a lot of museums have been thinking this way. We see ourselves as a museum that's, say, unafraid to take risks, or that when it being our curatorial team, recognizing we're dialoguing with a voice that we're really excited by, when we see that opportunity to acquire work, I challenge the curators to kind of be liberated from like a resume, So if an artist is at an early stage in their career, we can be unafraid to move forward on an acquisition. And I think there is something really kind of thrilling and exciting about that. The last thing I'll say about it, just from a strategic point of view, is that everybody is excited about young artists. What's not to love? And of course, our challenge and the work that we do is to sustain these young artists into more advanced parts in their career. But because there is such dynamism in amongst a young generation of artists, you see a lot of more established artists taking note of the collection too, and that opens up all kinds of other opportunities. The importance of young artists culturally today actually motivates collection building in other categories.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's been exciting to watch the collection grow. So I think the city of Miami, it's undergone a dramatic change post-COVID. You really have an influx of new residents, and as a result, there's also heightened attention on its cultural scene. From your perspective, how have these shifts impacted ICA Miami and the broader art ecosystem in the city?
I like to remind everybody when I have these conversations that it's been a long arc, and I've been pretty fortunate that the arc has been the entirety of my moving since 2013. But, there was a key moment in the arts specifically, but representative of, I guess, other markets, for lack of a better word. In 2001, 2002, when Art Basel put its flag down in Miami, that certainly was a harbinger of kind of growth ahead. Now, over the last 10 to 12 years, we've seen actually continual growth. So far before COVID, there has been a movement toward Miami and a shift in how people see and experience the city. And I think the institutions have at least a small part to play in that and in making what is kind of a tropical playground a place that people want to be, for a significant part of their time. Now, certainly with COVID and people moving down here or spending time here or renting houses and checking out the quality of life, and of course with and forgive me for banal observation, but with the rise of like remote work and also just the reconfiguration of centers of entrepreneurship and finance down to Miami, we've certainly seen sustained growth, and that's been really exciting. And it's sort of a historical moment in the history of the city as a result.
And Art Basel Miami Beach, it's one of the most influential art fairs in the world, of course, and I think unquestionably the most important in the U.S. In recent years, ICA Miami's exhibition openings during the fair week have really become perhaps the most well-attended event outside of the fair itself. How does having Art Basel in the same city impact the museum, both in terms of visibility as well as programming?
Sure. Well, yeah, Basel again has been transformative in the way that people think about Miami, and it's substantiated kind of all sorts of other activities. The fact that you have a major fair here and that you have institutions here, makes Miami more approachable when people are thinking about kind of where to move and live. Miami is a year-round city. Even in summer, there's, a vast and diverse and kind of complex visitorship to the city and to museums, not just from the United States, but from Brazil and other parts of South America, from Europe. So people are always kind of coming and going. And so, our mission, expands beyond Art Basel. Art Basel is a point because it is such a high profile event and a high profile week. And because at its core, it is a convention. Those are really our high profile professional days and weeks. And we welcome lots of our friends who don't otherwise come. But our mandate is to program kind of day in and day out. And in fact, our seasons are equally kind of busy with openings in December and in April. And, our biggest day outside of the Art Basel opening is our Pride festivities. There's like a really, really robust and interesting audience that's kind of here in this community all year round. Now, to speak a little bit about the historical significance of Art Basel, Basel was in many ways brought to Miami because of the strength and the voice of a number of the collectors who happen to be deeply ingrained into the history of the city. So people like Irma and Olga Brayman, I'd want to mention Mira and Don Rubel, the Delacruz family. Their advocacy for Art Basel coming to Miami was, I think, on the part of the fair, a real demonstration of confidence in the global art market, in the community that was here. And the community then took it upon themselves to give back to the fair. And that meant supporting the fair. It meant a real growth in collection building, both amongst that nuclei of families, but also well beyond it. And that meant that Forgive me, I should have the statistic, but per capita, they're probably the most collectors here of any city in the country, at least in Miami Beach and the city of Miami. I think that the influence has been two-way and it's been really profound.
And finally, let's talk about ICA Miami's upcoming gala, Evening in the Garden, taking place this Saturday, March 8th. It's been exciting for myself to be a part of the auction committee this year, and I'm really looking forward to the event. What can guests expect this year? How can people bid on the auction artworks? And for anyone listening who might want to attend last minute, are there still some tickets available?
There is limited availability. Please feel free to reach out, gala@icamiami.org. If you have any inquiries, we'd love to be able to see you if you can. The Evening in the Garden, and this is the first year with this title, is exactly that. It's a really immaculate celebration of all of the museum's success and impact that takes place in the museum's beautiful sculpture garden. The sculpture garden is a really, really unique amenity in Miami, which really has a premium on open public space. It's a really kind of gorgeous jungle landscape in there, and there are 5 beautiful sculpture which dot the garden. We'll have about 300 of our closest friends amongst us, and in that group is a wonderful selection of artists who have participated in our live and silent auction. There are some 25 artists. And the thing that I think is, to me, the most profound, I guess the most personal, is the relationships that we have with each of these artists. I believe that almost all of these artists have been featured in either our collection or an exhibition or both. For many of them, we were the first U.S. museum acquisition. A number of these artists have made new work for the auction, which is super, super exciting. And of course, commissioning our work is such a big part of what we do as an institution, working with artists at crucial times in their career. There's a fantastic painting from Katerina Kaserman, who of course has a show at Marquez Art Projects, which is owned and operated by one of our trustees, John Marquez. There's a beautiful tapestry by Sanaa Gateja, who's having a show on our ground floor this spring. There are 25, so I'm not going to go through all of them, but Hugh Hayden has provided a really beautiful skillet piece called Life's a Drive Without You, which has a kind of gorgeous copper plating on it, and lips kind of in the style of lipstick on both the mouth and the eyes. It's a really, really beautiful and seductive work. So it's really just an exciting moment to celebrate all of these artists who've had such a deep connection to our collection and program. We have an amazing committee, which is, of course, yourself, Mickey Mang, Jack Wilkes, Monica Eulitz, and I don't think I'm forgetting anybody, but everybody. Oh, and Cassandra Hirschberg, who all of whom have come through, and you work so closely with us year round, and it's just so meaningful and powerful to kind of continue that relationship to support the museum at this auction. So we are projecting that the gala will raise over $2.25 million. If the auction is successful, then, or really successful, because that's kind of projecting with a minimum, then we'll be at 2.5. And this is a super important year for ICA Miami, given the fact that it is an expansion year. And so it's just a really important year for us and for our support. And the proceeds of the auction and the gala support ICA Miami's mission of free access. So one of the things I didn't mention is that while we're in the Miami Design District, which is centrally located in the city of Miami, we are free to the public every day. And not only that, and for our free admission is supported by City National, but our programs are also free. So talks, lectures, education program partnerships with over a dozen organizations working with at-risk youth, programs that go into public schools and provide critical arts access where it does not exist. All of these programs are supported by the Gala auction and by the hard work that you, Adam, and others have contributed.
Alex, thanks so much again for coming onto the podcast and sharing some of your thoughts on the strategies and visions behind everything you've done at ICA Miami to build it into the institution that it is today. We really appreciate it, and we're looking forward to seeing you on Saturday.
Thanks, Adam. We're very honored to have you amongst our supporters not living in Miami and as an ambassador for ICA in Miami wherever you go. So appreciate you and all you do.
Of course. Thanks again, Alex.
Thanks.